mortgage interest rates per gender. Okay, they want that. They want to leave the OECD. Colombia, believe it or not, is now an OECD country. And among other things, the OECD said you need to do a pension reform because there is a budget issue. So now they want to leave the OECD. And nowadays in Colombia, OECD is like the IMF in the 80s. Okay, we hate them. Oh, they're supposed to be hated. Okay. More money for culture. This is, I mean, they want that the Colombian state, whether the government and other, they can only hire Colombian artists when they're going to do some present. No foreign artists. So, you know, very nationalistic issue, right? You know, some famous politician in the U.S. would like something like this, right? Only national artists, right? So, essentially, 104 points which are, I mean, there's no possibility to actually negotiate on them, right? There's no way we can do that. But this is the status quo, the current state of affairs. So, who is marching? Well, who is walking on? Teachers. Teachers are formal workers. They have a special health and pension regime, different than the one I have as a worker at the university. They have their own regime, and they are willing to do everything they can to defend it. Union workers, they are formal workers also, so they have all this access to benefits. Middle class is also much, and this is not common in Colombia. The middle class people that, you know, traditionally just don't care about this stuff, they are also walking and marching at some point. And of course, informal workers, and then the people. And I want to think who the people is. Okay? So, and this is no surprise in this here. We have, as much of Latin America, strong informality, 50%. That means no job security, no pension plans, incomplete access to health, which health in Colombia is pretty good, actually, in terms of access, though not quality, okay? 90-something%, but we have to work on the quality. No access to the financial system. We have a high unemployment rate, but if you're going to do a labor reform, because you have 50% informality, and I'll tell you, and you have 50% informality, well, you have to play with these things, right? Unions don't want that. They are not interested in labor. They are okay if more they want. But, so this is a graph I made, that's why in Spanish, essentially is the real growth of the minimum wage. And you can see that this government is actually so weak that they're giving really strong growth rates to the minimum wage in the past 2 years. Highest in recorded history, okay? But if you want to do a pension reform, you have to play with something. So, with what? Well, the minimum wage is around $260. But if you are a formal worker, if I am a firm and I hire an employee for the minimum wage, I have to pay $435. The overcost is 65%, 68%. Almost 70. I mean, it's a bunch of money. It's too much money. So, of course, somewhere in between, if you want to think of a labor reform that will make it cheaper or something, you know, there's no labor reform yet, but you know, the government thinking about it. But these guys don't want that. So no labor reform. That's against workers. Pensions. More contradiction. Pensions. Colombia has a mixed system. That means we have the pay-as-you-go, which is the traditional pyramid thing where the young pay for the old, right? And the pre-funded personal account, which is the Chilean system where you have a private system, right? We have a mix of both. But we have a problem that only 25% of workers are covered by pension. That's even lower than, right? Because some people actually pay at some point in their life for pension, but they don't manage to fulfill all the requirements that they need to actually receive a pension, okay? And when you receive a pension in the pay-as-you-go system, well, you really receive more money than the money you actually paid during your working years to the pension fund, because of the idea of the pyramid, right? But remember, the pyramid kind of makes sense still in Colombia, but 50% don't pay pensions, right? Don't pay. So the pyramid is a weird pyramid, okay? And so the system runs. So the OECD said, you guys need to work on that. You have a huge deficit, it's going to explode. So who doesn't want that? Well, again, teachers, which will receive their pension, workers which will receive the pensions, and students. The students are young guys. But for some reason, they haven't grasped this. Why? Well, to change the pension reform, the easiest way actually, and is to increase the age of retirement. But you saw what happened in France. And, right? So the president, he didn't even negotiate. The first day he said, I'm not changing the age, which is terrible because that's actually the easiest variable and the strongest variable in terms of the effect on the budget deficit. But so that's out of the table right now because it's the word of the president. So the other thing is to reduce subsidy. What subsidy? Well, what I'm saying, when I pay every month from my salary, but what I will receive in the pay-as-you-go is more than what I actually send to the pot, to the big pot. Okay? So these students say, well, I haven't started working and they are still in my pension. No, they didn't get it. You will have no pension if we don't do a reform. But they are marching together with the guys that don't want a reform. I don't know, they're not the brightest students. Because they haven't understood that they're marching against themselves. If there's no pension reform, they will have essentially no pension, no money. I will have a pension. I'm old, well, growing old. Yeah? So if anyone needs a pension reform, it's the students. So they shouldn't be asking for that. But they are. And they just have fun. And then the people. This is the people. This is a picture I took once in Bogota. No snow. And four guys in these bicycle taxis, things that are completely illegal. They are illegal. They shouldn't exist. They have no permit, they have no insurance, they have no nothing. They don't exist. But they exist. These guys work for some guy who probably owns the four of these, who doesn't pay taxes, right? This is the informal economy in Latin America, right? This is the people. And these people are also marching. Why? It's fun to march, right? You go and march, something to do, we cannot work, so let's go and walk. But the point is, or my point is that these guys are actually, which is the majority, are actually the only ones that are not represented in the table. Because these guys need the pension reform and especially the labor reform. Because they work now, probably all these guys are in the 20s, those the ones that ride in the bike, right? They are in their 20s. They are not paying any kind of pension. They have this access to health because it's kind of universal in Colombia. Quality is pretty poor, right? So they would need to change the status quo. And I claim the problem is that the unions, the teachers, they are part of the formal elite. It's an elite because it's the minority. They are an elite. They will never accept anyone calling them an elite. But they are the elite of the workers. And the students, especially those in the public universities, are also part of an elite. They are gaining human capital, which is still small portion of the population in Colombia and Latin America, still university-wise, right? And they are not marching for these guys. So the poor, those in need, are not represented. They've never seen the president. They have never talked to them, and they probably wouldn't know what to ask for. Okay? So just to wrap up, my point is, yeah, economic, there are issues. We have issues, a bunch of issues, but that's not the reason. It's politically. The president and his government is hugely unpopular. Left-wing parties are happy and trying to promote every much they can. Students are trying to defend their accords, but they also marching, for unexplained reasons. Unions and teachers use popular arguments to defend their own interest. We defend the education, all this stuff, but it's not clear. And sure, there is corruption, of course. Colombia, yeah. Violence has surged. Not as 20 years ago, but violence has gone a bit up. And these are sure part of what they claim. They want to reduce that, but that's not their main petitions. And so again, this week, 2 more days, okay, of another FECODE, the teachers union, and they just want to go because they are, when they say here they are attacking and threatening us, it's just not literally attacking them, just they're threatening them and saying, we don't like you, and so don't talk. They just want too much, okay? Everything, I think, is mostly motivated by political reasons. It's going to be like this. I came here for 6 months, and I was, at some point when I was coming, I said, well, when I go back, no. This is going to go on until 2022. Period. Why? Because the guy is president and the other guy is not president. So in 2022, we need to elect a guy in the middle. Because that's the point. Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, go ahead. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me ask you this. This is a very interesting topic, but I want you to tell us about your perspective in terms of. You mentioned at the beginning that Colombia is doing well in its economics, But what is the reason that we see this immigration, Colombians fleeing the country and going to other countries? Mexico is a good example, maybe the U.S. What is happening in that regard?
Well, we have a migration issue right now, but it's not in terms of immigration, but Venezuelans immigrating.
Okay.
We have had 2 waves, strong waves in the 80s and in the 90s. Right now is normal, I guess. Right now we have 1.5 million Venezuelans. They literally come into the country walking. So I went in the summer I drove to near the border to Venezuela, and you would see with the families, kids, they're walking into the country. They're running away. So that's the issue we have in terms of migration. Venezuelans everywhere, and we're trying, actually the government is doing a good role on that. We're trying to be open, have them go to school, study, help, but it's very expensive, so it's costly. And some want to explain part of the unemployment rate on the Venezuelans. It's not clear yet. You have to look at some data still to be sure.
Thank you, wonderful presentation. I agree with you with the issue of representation and the difficulty of representation for those groups that you mentioned. I disagree somewhat with the issue of it translates into support of status quo. And what I mean by that is, if I'm a person on the left, I might be saying, I don't want pension reform or I don't want labor reform done by a rightist government, which is going to be the wrong reform, right? And so I don't necessarily equate that to support for status quo, rather as thinking that the way this particular government would deal with reform would not achieve goals of equality, for example.
I agree with you actually, but the left parties probably want to do the reform themselves, right? But Yeah, and they keep, what they say everywhere, neoliberalism and all this stuff. It's terrible and destroy the country. Whatever measure you use, Colombia is better today than 20 or 30 years ago. But I haven't heard of any proposal that they have to actually do pension reform. I don't know, a magical idea that will benefit the poor without taking some toll on those who are formal right now. I mean, it's very difficult. I haven't heard from them, and the easiest way, as I said, is to change the age, but then they don't want that either. Increase what you have to pay, they don't want that either. I don't know. Probably at some point they will have an idea. I haven't heard the idea. Okay, question.
Yeah, in your discussion of what's going on in Colombia, you didn't mention a couple of things that I think are important. There are paramilitary structures throughout the country.
There are, sorry?
There's the paramilitary, there are paramilitaries in many areas of the country, including the area that we in the Colombia Support Network, which I remember, we support a community that is threatened by paramilitaries in northern Colombia. That's a question of public order that you haven't mentioned at all. The other thing, if I could just say, the other thing is that the election resulted in 10 million votes for Duque, but Gustavo Petro, a candidate who left, had 8 million votes. And the left had never had anything like 8 million votes. I think the most they had previously was in the neighborhood of 2.7 million. This is kind of a dynamic, I would suggest, that really should be addressed. What's happening? How is the left getting 8 million votes when the president only gets 10 million?
So, regarding the paramilitary, yes, I didn't on purpose because I think it's an issue. I think they're part of the killing of these social leaders. And they are a problem, but they are not a problem related directly to the protests, which is what I was trying to talk about today. In the countryside there is a paramilitary, there is factions of the guerrilla that have no name yet. There are Mexican cartels going, there's everyone trying to go and get what is left. Regarding the 8 million votes and the 10 million votes, it's true. Never in Colombia where has a leftist leader gained so much votes. That is true. But the reason for this, and part of this is true also for Duque, is that, as I said, we were voting against the two extremes. So, essentially, Petro really has 3 million votes. You see it when he was sent for mayor in Bogotá, or when he has moved his party to other regions and stuff. The other votes, and this is I cannot back up this with hard data, but essentially much of the votes that Duque got and that Petro got, and I would say easily 50% of both, were votes against the other. And that's why when Duque came into power, he was very unpopular because people really weren't that happy with him. There was no excitement about Duque winning. It's just the other one didn't win. And the same thing, many that voted for Petro say, I don't want Uribe to win again, which is what they saw Duque. So I really don't think Petro has himself 8 million votes. He didn't earn them in a particular context. But if he had, for instance, if he had run against the other, there's 2 rounds in Colombian elections, right? So the other guy was Fajardo, which was kind of in the middle. Probably, if he had passed to the second round, he would have won, because everyone voting against the other would have voted for him, and he had some votes. And question.
I was just wondering. First of all, thank you for this talk. I feel like it clarified a lot. I've been kind of following the protests through friends, and so I appreciate the big picture here. But I was wondering if you could comment a little bit on how the protest might look different in different regions, because it was a countrywide protest, and obviously the issues would be different elsewhere. So I was wondering if you knew anything about outside of Bogota, what the variations or the issues or kind of the makeup of the protesters that you were describing.
From other regions, they tend to say or criticize us from Bogota that we tend to look very centralized. The country, everything goes and starts and ends in Bogota. This time I think it's not Bogota, it's the cities. So I would say, there was a strong violence in Cali and Bogota, not in Medellin, for instance, which is supposed to be more violent, but it actually isn't, right? But I don't think there are regional differences in terms of these national protests. I don't see them, at least. I don't know of them. There may be some specificities in regions near the Venezuelan border. They are worried about too much immigration, and there's an economic cost because the economy used to run based on people moving across the border. But I think more or less this is a national movement what they have right now. Okay, more questions?
Okay, yeah. From the senior citizens side, I got this question here. How do you see the role of the International Monetary Fund in Colombia's current economy?
So I forgot, I had that in the first slide. Yes. They had IMF. We currently have no program with IMF. We have some money lent, some open line, it's called. But it's not the 80s. We really, the IMF is there, we use it, but there's no strong attachment right now with them. Not that what's going to happen with Argentina or what went to Greece or nothing like that. We have some lines open with the World Bank, with the IMF, and the government used them mostly because of cash flows and stuff. But we're okay with that. Question?
Yeah, you mentioned the people in the informal society as being active and marching, even though there weren't necessarily demands that were actually supportive of them?
The people in, sorry?
The people generally, the informal
Okay.
people, everyone who's not having a pension or getting any sort of benefit from the system. Were there no demands put forward by this mass of people? Was there any reason?
Probably there are, but I don't know, because they have no voice. They have no leaders. These guys I showed you, those 4 bikes are not owned by them. It's by some guy who has some money, probably a lot of money, and has 100 bikes, and pays them some money with no benefits of any kind. Those guys probably go on march. I had some people I know that went to march because it was fun. Because then with all this vandalism came a kind of idea that people should march in peace. So peace got strongly related with music. So at the end of each march, they would go to several parks in Bogota and have these bands play, and essentially it was fun, and it's Latin America, so where there's music, it's fun, right? And so they would go and march because it was fun. At some point, it came to that at the end of last year, right? Especially the first march in December, because it's December, so, go and we have this dancing march. So it's cool. But I haven't heard really any informal, I don't know if any of these guys are able to put on their think about the 100 and thing proposal I showed you. Clearly there are some people from the LGBTI community that got into that and asked for a bunch of things for them, HIV research, I don't know, things, because they are a community, very strong. The teachers, the workers, the students, LGBTI community. Who's these people? Yeah? No one really cares about it.
Well, I guess I'm curious if, when you're excluded from the table, where do you go to make your voice heard? And maybe it's in some of these protests, but it's like when people just look at the overall kind of larger structural proposals, they're not actually listening to the people who are present in the protests. And it seems like maybe that's some of the.
My belief is that they believe, think about it, these are, the informal people are probably not very well educated. They don't follow very closely on politics. They just follow what is said on the street. So on the street, you know that Duque is an idiot, right? And we have to go against the guy because everything that is wrong on me is because of the guy. I don't think they really ask much further questions in the normal person, right? Probably there's a smart guy somewhere, but they are unable to actually pop up and say, I want to really defend these guys, and we need some kind of pension reform that does this, or some kind of labor reform, or we need, something. Okay?
I'm just seeing, always ask the question. I'm just seeing that there is certain similarity between what you're describing and the Spanish movement of indignados, in terms of like the amount of postulates that obviously cannot be negotiated with the government one by one, but at the same time they kind of set basis for construction of political movements later on, which are becoming politically effective. So this could be just some sort of brainstorming process. And I wonder if you see any advantages for, kind of boiling down of different social questions, even though at that very moment that might not be very politically effective.
Well, there is something going on. For the first time in 20 or something years, almost, yeah. Uribe is very unpopular too. He was a very weird case of a politician that was always very, and now he's really unpopular. Not as much as Duque, but a bit less unpopular, right? And in that sense, yeah, things are changing. Now the problem is that the left is not unified. So even the unions clearly said that the leader of the 8 million votes didn't represent them, because he's trying to pull all this movement towards him and try to gain political power. And they're saying, no, you're not, because at the end, if Petro were to be, he's really very socialist in the socialist term, right? And he would really, if he could, he would change everything structurally, including pensions, right? He would probably privatize, and actually I heard that from Petro. Nationalize the private funds and do what Venezuela did with the petroleum money, with the oil money, but with this money. But they're very divided. I wouldn't be surprised if some leader comes out of this. For example, the students, one of them, a girl, is really smart. She talks very well. And maybe, some leaders, I don't know if I'm entire political party, but yeah, something will come out of this, I'm pretty sure. We just don't know the names. Yeah.
No, I was. My question was in the same line. Like, if you have a sense, like how things might sort out eventually, because there's like paralysis.
For now, there are protests today in Bogota, and think about when I say this, it's 25 guys standing in the middle of the street and saying we are here in a peace protest. So, yeah, they're peacefully protest, but they do it every day. Nothing is going to move, right? We are going to be like this until 2025, until the elections, the next election. And that's going to be an interesting election, because we're going to see if Petro, the 8 million vote guy, really won political strength. I don't see it. But someone has to grab this indignados everyone is claiming about. It's not clear who yet. But then Duque, 4 years earlier, was a no one. But he was a senator, no one knew him. Okay? So I think things might move towards some kind of leader. But in terms